All right, hey everybody. So we are recording now. Thank you for joining at a different time than we normally do. And the purpose of today's group is or today's meeting is to do a little bit of a retro on the way this working group has been working together for the past couple of months and to figure out how we want to operate moving forward. And we'll be considering questions like our relationship to the foundation and how independently we would like to operate and how we want to support our goals moving forward as a community group. So we have that all detailed in an agenda. Thank you, Brittany, for putting that on GitHub. I'm going to share my screen. We'll take a look at it now. Hey, Harold. Okay. All right. Okay. So how's everyone doing, first of all?
Regular Monday morning, still booting up. How's everyone else doing?
Same. I was just saying that to Brittany.
I'm half asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel for you folks on the West Coast.
Yeah, the only person who's figured it out is Jason, who is up so early and just operates as though he's on East Coast time, even though he's on the West Coast.
Yeah, but I'll admit I'm lagging a little bit today too. But I'm here, and I think that
Okay. All right.
Jason, you need more coffee. That's the secret.
There you go. Yeah, you're right. It's only cup number 2, not cup number 10.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I wouldn't recommend having that much coffee. So, but anyway, beyond that, we'll get into our discussion topics. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think that this idea for a retro came up because we all seem to want to get more aligned on what our focuses and goals are, and also want to figure out the best ways for us to work together moving forward. I know that we've been pretty consistent about our meetings every Wednesday for the past few months, and I know that folks like Jason have done a ton of work in refining our standard operating procedures and making all of our work really accessible to the broader community, which is great. But especially as we look ahead of Stacks 2 and like looking after that, I think that there's a lot of scope for this working group to take the lead on some very important community issues. And so I think that there's some unresolved questions about, how we want to go about tackling those issues and what our relationship would be like with the foundation as, sort of a supporting institution and not necessarily like a member of the working group. So, under discussion topics, we had a few very basic discussion topics listed. So, things like potential new meeting times and, how we want to work together, but also some deeper considerations as well. So, what are the most impactful community issues that we could work on? I know that all of us are really passionate about acting as a voice for the broader Blockstack or Stacks community, and what do we need for that to be productive? Is it funding? Is it other tools for this group to work more effectively? So with that, I'm going to open up the floor to other members and just get your thoughts on all of that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think like the getting set up of the foundation was a huge undertaking of this group, and I think that that's been really great. I think the thing that I imagine going forward is how does the governance working group set initiatives, be able to come up with ways to support different needs in the community, and then can always approach the foundation with those things, but that the group feels like it's an independent group and not just necessarily a auxiliary group to the foundation. Because I think as we grow the initiatives under the foundation, this group will I want it to be like a community entity that communities can come to and interact with and engage with around specific governance questions, around the support of different technologies. And that, may or may not require, the foundation's input. So like how to make it feel like it truly belongs to the community and the way that it's organized. I also see that this could be a good transition point because very soon we're launching our grants program. And so with that, potentially obtaining a grant for this group, so like self-organized community working and have different initiatives, and then being able to apply for potential funding through the foundation grants program in order to pursue different directives or supporting different community initiatives, things like and Jenny and I talked a little bit about this before, but like I think that there's a growing voice from the community around what does like Radix support look like, and how does that get managed within the community. And I think that that's like an interesting governance question that this group could work on, in addition to things like our focus on privacy and why that's important and how that manifests either within our community or externally. How do we support that? I think like that's a really interesting governance question that could be taken on as well. So that's a lot of thoughts, but that's where my head is at. But I'm open to, if people have completely different ideas surrounding just this group in general and like what they want to see. Is it shorter meetings, longer meetings, more meetings, whatever? That's also a topic that Jenny brought up.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, just two quick thoughts from my side. The first is that I guess I'm feeling a lack of clarity on the delineation between the role and responsibilities that are in the wheelhouse of the foundation relative to other stuff, the working group. And that could be a positive list, it could be a negative list, right? It could be like foundation does ABC, working group does, DEF. It could be foundation does everything except, Q, R, and F or something. There's different ways that could be structured. So that's the first point I wanted to make. It's a bit difficult to respond to the question without having more clarity on that. And the second one is like, I have always viewed the working group as a conduit for the needs of the broader community. And Brittany, I think you spoke to this really well just now. I was going to say, it's not sort of clear to me what needs the community has, what preferences they have. Obviously, the survey helped a bit, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. And I think that the examples you gave just now, Brittany, around things like privacy, and sorry, I'm having a total brain freeze here. What was the other example?
Radix, yeah, which
yes.
is collections.
Yes, exactly, right. You mentioned Radix. That's a great example. So like those are two concrete things that I think that this group could choose to tackle if they wanted to, and I wonder what else is on that list.
Yeah, to that point, Lane, I think your question around the delineation between the foundation and the working group has been, I feel like it's maybe the area in which we get stuck. But seeing as how this is a community working group, I don't see why I don't see what would stop this group from asking for whatever it is that the community needs, right? I think that, when we talk about Radix, that is something that is a big blocker for our app developers who make up a huge part of our community. And to me, that's the governance issue, right? If we are, if there's a tool that is blocking community members from being productive or being effective in the work they want to do, especially as it really relates to the wider work that they want to do on privacy, then that falls under the umbrella of the kind of work that the governance working group can do. So in my mind, what I envision the future of this relationship looking like is with something like the grants program, the foundation would obviously have a process set up to allocate grant money. But as far as making the case for needing that kind of funding to support community initiatives, I see the working group as having a lot more leverage, because this working group represents the community. It is the voice of the community, and if it requires more work in the area of talking to community members, or doing another survey, or doing focus groups to really understand what the community needs to function the way that it wants to, then I see this group taking the lead on that kind of work. And letting the foundation know, like, hey, this is the pulse of the community, this is what people need, and like, here are the ways in which you can support, here's how we're going to propose that you can do it, and here are the ways that we think here are the ways that we think are going to promote equity and productivity in the community. And it would be hard for the foundation to disagree with a lot of that, given that this group is very representative of what the community wants and what the community thinks. So that's how I see the evolution sort of playing out.
I would agree with Jenny and Brittany and everything that's been said before this moment, before I opened my mouth. But I also think that we need more community. We definitely need more interaction with the community, and having our pulse on what the community's needs are. You mentioned Radix. I would prefer to call it collections, because not everybody wants to use or likes the Radix product, let's put it that way. And I know that Friediger and Tadia and Dant have all been talking about collections for some months. And that's sort of gone by the wayside, but that's something that's extremely important from an app development perspective, to be able to share information without sharing information, so to speak. There's the complete privacy block of the information of the individual user, but you still have, they can take their information from each app. It provides a better experience for the user overall. But so without getting into the technical stuff, I know I talked with Jenny about this, would like to see more community involvement and more of our involvement taking on specific projects. And I think all of you have spoken to projects that we can start moving forward on. I like the idea of being able to support the community in grants, because I've heard from community members about, how can we get grants for work that we're creating for the overall community that will move things forward, whether it's in collections or in other areas. So I think being able to support community members and be perhaps an advocate is what I'm hearing in my head right now. I think those things are important. I think it's important for us to have our own there's the charter of the foundation, but our own charter as community members, our own mission. And I know that I've talked to Dan, and I've talked to Jenny about the idea that one of our key ethos as a community that for me is different from other blockchain communities is this. I mean, it's not completely different, but there's a real focus here on can't be evil, on privacy, on a user-owned internet, all of those things. And though that's something that needs to be part of our own mission statement as our own charter as a working group, our own, what our foundation is. And then somehow we as a working group handle these different issues. What steps do we take? And I think Lane and Jason have done incredible work that's going to set us up for moving forward. And I agree with Brittany that this is kind of the tipping point right now where we can start taking over, or not taking over, but start working with the community on different projects. So that's my thoughts for today. So thanks.
Thanks, Juliet. I also agree with everything that you said right up until I opened my mouth. Thank you for just summing up all that up really nicely. I think what is exciting about the possibility of this group applying for a grant is, number one, being able to operate very independently and efficiently and sufficiently, and also maybe being more biased toward action, which is like a very strong value, I think, in this community. And on the Blockstack team. So you talk about ways that we're different. When we write our own charter, I think it would probably be impossible to write a charter now that would encapsulate everything that we stand for or want to do. And it would probably take in my opinion, I think it would take a few iterations of like working with the community and seeing what our dynamic is and what the needs of community actually are before we have an established charter in place. But that being said, with a grant, I think the beauty of that is that we could apply, or we could put together a proposal saying these are the things that this group wants to work on. This is what we stand for. One of our biggest priorities is promoting and enforcing privacy in the technology that we build. And these are the things that we want to get done in the next 3 months. So, Radix and collections being one of them. So, this group would oversee a bounty, for example, for Radix and collections, and we would be responsible for, onboarding or recruiting developers who could help us figure that out. And the other things that we could be responsible for are, more like educational content around privacy-centric applications, or more standards around our open source projects, or open source standards. I know we've talked about contributing guidelines on GitHub, for example. So there are a few deliverables that this group could definitely be responsible for, and we could hold ourselves accountable by applying for a grant and saying, like, for the next 3 months, this is what we want to do. We want to take the lead on this, but we are working directly with community, and we're here to represent what community wants. And should we deliver on X, Y, and Z, we would apply for like continued funding. And yeah, I can see that grant money going toward bounties, like I mentioned. It could also go toward meetings. So like I know that you and I talked about this, Juliet, but it's great to have these really productive working group sessions where we all have coffee or lunch together. I don't see why a grant shouldn't go toward that either. So I just think that like the vision for me is very clear when like grants become part of the picture.
I just think, Jenny, that brings a sense of camaraderie for people sitting with their coffee or their Starbucks or whatever when we, like we did with the women's meeting, of which I was only there for a short part, but it made you feel really connected with each other, and having that camaraderie and connection, I think is important when you're working closely on important issues. So it's a side issue, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And this work is time consuming, and I think that we shouldn't underestimate the amount of effort that's going to need to go into relationship building with community, right? So our group is one sliver of the community. There are so many other subgroups that we need to get to know better in order to get a real read on the needs of community. So, we might write a proposal where we outline 3 deliverables that we want to get done in the next 3 months, and then we show it to community, and everyone's like, no, we don't want that. So I think what I'm trying to stress is like the grant process holds us accountable in applying and submitting a proposal, and being very public about what we say we want to do for community. And I think that's actually one way to get more involvement from community as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that last point as well. It's exciting to hear all this discussion about collections. Yeah, I've noticed as well, and learned a lot about how focused and how important collections is to the broader community, but also learning things about how important restructuring the way data is collected going forward, right? And how important that is to the long-term sustainability of Web3 and blockchain-based systems in general, which is also something fundamental to the things that I put forward here in this working group. And so it really seems like there can be a two-way conversation, a dialogue created between developers, folks in data, with collections as that platform for that discussion. And it can be a tangible discussion, like spitting things out as the discussion happens. And so this seems like a very critical point where there can start to be some interaction, as Julia says, right, between the broader community and the governance working group, because it feels like data can be thought of in a systems design approach, and then really you can really address some of some of the fundamental things about long-term sustainability when you try to sow the seeds for what can turn into a better ecosystem of data than what we have now, which if we don't address it right in these beginning years of these blockchain-based systems, we can just have the same ecosystem that Jaron Lanier talks about leak into the next iteration of the internet. But it also seems like, important distributions of distributed power dynamics can be built into the system's approaches to data. And so, yes, it's exciting to hear this discussion come up here, and it's something that we're hopefully trying to contribute a piece to in the kernel project that we're thankful to have opportunity for. But yeah, so the grants, being able to go into priorities like that for this governance working group that can kind of enable folks that come into the ecosystem or folks that are already in the ecosystem to build in the way of long-term sustainability. It sounds like a beautiful idea, and it sounds beautiful that we'd be able to allocate resources, people or funding, right? Myself, people is a lot more valuable in a lot of ways. So I know that the grants can attract the people, and so that's a beautiful thing.
I just wanted to follow up on what Harold said, because it made me think of a conversation and what's come up recently in privacy. So one way or one possible thing that we can do, and I'm just throwing out ideas here, so not saying that it's something that I think we have to do or anything like that, is that recently we had the Schrems case and the Privacy Shield issues, which isn't really a problem for any developers on our platform, but still they'll want to have guidance, guidance when they're developing apps with respect to the, how do they, go about writing their, I'm just talking about, here's what some guidance from the governance group regarding privacy matters that are coming up in the greater wide world, so that there is some guidance for them about those particular privacy issues. And then given the Privacy Shield ruling that came up last week, that's extremely important, I think, for everyone to that type of thing that impacts worldwide, whether none of us are collecting any data in our applications, it's still important for us to have some consideration of how to interact with those larger world structures.
Juliet, I'm actually not familiar with what you're talking about. Would you mind just briefly introducing this Privacy Shield idea?
Okay, so there's been since the mid-90s, I think, I can't remember, but it's been a long time that there was a concept of Privacy Shield in the United States. And there was a way that you could, working through the FTC even, and through various private organizations, be able to protect your company and say that you took all the other than your terms and conditions and anything that's on your website or your applications or any of your products, that you are meeting all the requirements with respect to privacy. And it's an organization that would essentially validate that you were doing X particular steps with respect to privacy. And so now that's been struck down. And what that means is there's going to be a lot more heavy lifting that individual corporations or entities will have to do with respect to data that they use from the EU, US and other companies from others outside of the EU will have to do with respect to when they have EU community members or citizens on their applications or products or what have you, where data is flowing from the EU citizens into a US company's product. So there's it's kind of a really lame description, but it kind of gives you the general idea. There's a case that went through the Court of Justice on, I think it was Thursday, the ruling came down. And since then, there have been a number of webinars and such, like multiple on the day of the ruling and Friday through the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is a body that certifies people for to be privacy professionals. But there's been so much discussion and talk amongst lawyers and privacy professionals, and still going on to this moment about how will that impact us, and us being companies that have a data flow from EU to US or other countries. So that's, and I haven't gotten in the nitty-gritty details of the ruling. I know, but it's going to have a major impact. And probably this is where we're seeing more US universal privacy laws being enacted, or data-related laws being enacted. As you know, we've heard some over the last year, and even before that there's been pressure to have US, more like the CCPA in California, that there'll be much more regulation coming down for privacy from a federal level as opposed to just a state level. Does that answer the question?
Yes,
Somewhat?
thank you. Privacy is very important.
Thanks for sharing that, Juliet. And thanks, Harold, as well. I'll let my partner know that we're talking about Privacy Shield. He'll be so excited. But yeah, so are you saying that these kinds of rulings will obviously impact those in our community? And are you saying that these are the kinds of issues that this group would also be, or could be responsible for, I guess, being staying up to date on and being ahead on, in order to advise and assist community members who might be impacted by these policy changes?
I think that's an interesting question, because I would foresee that the foundation would be like the source of the information and education regarding these types of rulings and how they impact developers in the community. And so it's an interesting question, because then what is the role of the working group? I mean, if the foundation is the entity that talks about impact of privacy, education, and things like that around development, and then these I'll call them side issues of legislation that comes down the pike that can potentially impact developers, then what does the working group do with that? And I just see that us as really supporting that same mission. If the foundation is the sort of the real mouthpiece of what are the privacy concerns in our community, and how does this impact us, then the working group should be supporting the community members in some way, whether that is to create guidance, that working with the foundation to create guidance, and this is just one of many things, because we can talk about it from privacy perspective in this new case because it's something tangible, but there's so many ways that when we talk about education that we could be working hand in hand with the foundation to support community members from a guidance or educational perspective. So from supporting them with grants. So that's basically where I am.
Thank you. Brittany, is there anything that you already know about the foundation's role in those kinds of policy issues, or not yet? I mean, we're just getting up and running, so I'm assuming like not everything is figured out yet.
Yeah. Yeah, not everything is figured out yet, but yeah, I think, as the long view of the foundation is that it will probably continue to be a very small, like, quote unquote, staff. And so our goal is to be able to help like empower different groups, different organizations, different like working groups, committees, to be able to get important work done that supports the mission. So it's like we can help amplify and direct resources, like whether that's funding more research towards certain ideas, or encouraging publishing of certain ideas, or groups to take on these different challenges. But I think it is one of these, like a little mix of like, we don't want to be the sole carrier of that mission. We want to like find like the 1,000, 10,000 people that we can support who are helping that mission, and that's how we really scale and grow. So I do believe like the policies will need to be aligned with the mission, and we have some we do have a voice to like have feedback on that and kind of direct resources depending on where we think that's happening. But it's some of the onus is on individuals or collectives of people to kind of scope out what exactly those policies look like and how they think they could be implemented or how they should be implemented. And then we can help greenlight stuff, but maybe not like we're dictating down what should be done and then the community kind of accepts it. It's more trying to feed the grassroots, if that makes sense. So that's the way I envision it. It's still early days though, so that's not in stone yet either.
I like that what you said about feeding the grassroots, Brittany. That makes sense to me. So if there aren't any further comments on how the working group would, or what the working group would like to tackle, and on the grant idea, I'm wondering whether it would be good for us to talk about like how we want to start working on that. So it sounds like the grant idea is totally, like, we totally have the green light on that. That's something that we can apply for. Is there a platform for that yet, Brittany?
So coming soon, I just started working with grant.io, who built like an open source software platform that will help like have a platform so people can apply for a grant. So their delivery date is within like the next 2 weeks. So with that, it's basically a website where people can input their grant proposal. They can get feedback on their ideas. People can comment in the community. So with that coming up so quickly, I think that this would be a great group to kind of like help, beta test that by, obviously going through the grant process for a real grant that they want to propose, but also helping to kind of guinea pig, just making sure that it all works and it all makes sense.
I have a question about the grant process. I mean, I'm sure I've said this before. I think it's a great starting point. I think it's a very concrete deliverable. I think it's something where this group could add value right out of the gate. But I think there's a couple ways it could work logistically, right? So, and I'm just a little unclear on kind of what Jenny and Brittany, what you're conceiving of here, right? One way is like what you just mentioned, Brittany, which is like we as a group apply for a grant with some specific set of deliverables and a roadmap and all that. I think that makes sense and it's probably worth doing, although we have to figure out what the usage of funds would be. There's a second path, which is kind of like this group applies for a meta grant, for lack of a better word, and then intends to kind of like give some of that funding out to other projects as grants or as sub grants. And then there's like a third way of looking at it, which is that this group could help steward the grant process, right? Help kind of projects or teams apply for grants, help them prepare for that process, help them get their kind of application in order, maybe even help review the applications, but then the like final decision would be in the hands of the foundation. So there's just different paths forward. I'm kind of wondering where you're at on those options.
I was thinking strictly of number one, at least for the short term. So, and a few reasons for that. So, there are outstanding issues that I think that we as a community group know exist that we want to tackle, and I think the progress on those issues have been slow, and they are also fundamentally, governance related issues when we talk about things like RADx and collections. So applying for a grant ourselves would empower us to work on those issues and come up with solutions for them and actually deliver that for the community. And I think that that is, to Juliet's point. Juliet often talks about serving the community and being voiced for the community, and I think that it would be really meaningful for us to start off that way. After that first period, of course, I think that there is scope for using grants in many different ways. So this group could potentially become a group that helps other projects apply for grants, or allocate funding ourselves. I don't know whether we would feel comfortable doing that, but maybe that's how the group would evolve. But yeah, in my mind, I was strictly looking at the first option, applying for a grant ourselves to fund some work that we would like to get done in the next 3 to 6 months or so, and sort of going off of that work. So, depending on how well we do there, maybe we would continue to apply for grants. Brittany mentioned that some projects do like a monthly grant, and that is, and that actually addresses some of the concerns that I've heard other community members have. So, like I've talked to Dan about this group, and I think the issue of like term limits came up, right? So this group could have symbolic power, but if the group isn't actually, producing any work, then who holds them accountable for that? And I think that by having to reapply for a grant on like a quarterly basis or so, that a grant that is based on the kind of work that we're promising to deliver is that would hold us more accountable to the community. Yeah, so that's where my head was at.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Did anyone else have a different idea of how grants would be used and applied?
What you just mentioned made sense, it seems.
Great. I guess, well, I mean, that's really exciting, first of all, because we've just been talking about grants for a while. Okay, so I guess like the next order of business, and we have about 15 minutes, but is talking about how we would like to work moving forward. So if our biggest issue here is that we as a group need to submit a proposal for a grant, I'm assuming that all of our upcoming meetings would be around that. So putting our heads together to figure out what we want to put in that proposal. And Brittany, once that platform is ready, I think there will probably be more guidance on the formatting of our proposal too, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So that's part of the launch and the work that's getting done. So, and I think we talked about this in another governance call, but just sort of setting expectations. So the goal is to have sort of a beta grants program where grants will be in smaller size. So you can apply for grant up to like 5K is probably going to be the amount. So that means like either scoping your project to that amount, or if it's like, once you hit certain milestones, you can have additional funding. So just trying to keep with like that, start very small, but get the process working. And then once we know that the process is working well, we can, sort of ramp up like the size of grants and things over time.
Okay, thanks for that. And Lane, Jason, you've done a lot of work on on the way that we work. So I wanted to get your thoughts on how what still needs to be done there and how we want to balance that with this grant proposal that this group will now work on. Whether like that work in maintaining our repo and all of our tools should go into the proposal as well, like as something that we want to treat as a deliverable so that other community members understand how to get involved too. What are your thoughts there?
Jason, I'd love to let you jump in here first if you're able to speak right now.
Yeah, definitely. So as I'm listening along, you know, I feel like definitely the biggest part I've been able to play in all this is just helping with that organization and structure. And I do feel like at this point, we want to find a way to make this something that anybody could approach, anybody could pick it up, and anybody could do it. So it's not reliant just on myself or somebody else or anything like that. So when we're looking at, you know, this whole process in the early stages of the grants and a little bit of what I had put in some of the issues towards having like small bounties or some sort of budget towards completing tasks, I do feel like our first steps will be in this beta process, learning how to apply that together. So, you know, do we say, hey, we have a certain budget for notes updates, for examples, following meetings, or just how I can better help organize and structure things is more what I'm trying to key into as part of this conversation.
So I agree with Jason, unsurprisingly. I just wanted to add that we've done quite a bit of the style of stuff that he's describing in Ethereum in some of the groups I've been a part of there, and it's worked pretty well. One concrete example of this is Gitcoin. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the website or with the organization, but they facilitate bounties attached to things like GitHub issues. They can be paid out in multiple cryptocurrencies, et cetera. So there's some established practice here that we can turn to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the Gitcoin model it's had some issues with our community members, but overall people seem to have really enjoyed that. So yeah, it could be a case of us sort of downloading all of the work that Jason has done, for example, and surfacing the areas that still need help in attaching bounties to those areas. Am I hearing you correctly, Jason, in that interpretation?
Well, both in that and in regular things moving forward. Like, for example, on our agenda here, we talked about like what are the different community roles that could be assumed without having too much complexity or requiring too much from any one actor. But when we look at somebody who's going to take notes or publish related items, or, you know, what are the actionable items that something could be tied to, so it's you get your value back out of the time spent, because time is that one resource that we all only have so much of. But at the same time, you know, we're here because we love this idea. We're here because we want to represent the community. And it would be nice just to bring that full circle and give some value back from the project as well. So just trying to figure out how those things tie together and to complete those smaller action items.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so as a next step, this was, you know, this call was scheduled so that we would have most of the time to talk about these issues, but we do have our regular working group calls as well. Does anyone have any major opinions on changing the time of our meeting, changing the frequency of our meetings, and how we structure those meetings as well?
I just want to add one very quick thought, which is that I think regularity is important. I think even if not a lot is getting done on the calls, even just the check-in, the going over the list of things, having that on a sort of quote unquote official record, I think that that's really valuable for the community as a kind of permanent resource and as a foundation upon which you know, kind of transparent, accountable governance can be built.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Lane.
I also agree with Lane. I have this urgent request that we not have it at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So,
I'm very sympathetic to that.
Yeah. More people can attend.
just to throw an idea out here, sometimes at this point in a conversation like this, we'll try to pick a better time. And in my experience, that's very difficult because there's a lot of variables floating around. Maybe we just do the simplest possible thing and we circulate like a doodle or something, and everyone can just fill in the times that they're available, and we pick the one that everyone's available the most. Just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, don't see an issue with that. We could totally do that.
I will circulate that today.
Thanks, Lane. Yeah, it always gets tricky when we get folks involved from just even, when folks are like 12 hours ahead. So, this is going to be an ongoing issue, but for now, we can cater to this particular group's interests or preferences.
Well, that
But is there?
Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Jason. Is there a? I know there's like a standard time that may be good for everybody, whether you're wherever you. I mean, there's always going to be a problem with certain time zones, but is there one good time that you found that Lane, what you found or that anyone's found that is a good time for meetings in the morning, for that, so we could get participation from people in other places? I just wondered about that because I think Brittany brought that up too.
So this is pretty straightforward. If you want to be available to as broad a swath of people as possible, it inevitably ends up at 10 or 11 o'clock New York time. That's the only option, because that's already, that's midnight in Japan. That's like, 2 a.m. in Australia. Now, if we're trying to focus more regionally and say, okay, we're trying to, focus on North America, South America, we have more flexibility. There's two other options, right? One is that we have 2 different calls. We have one for one set of time zones, one for another. And the third possibility is that we rotate. And we've done all of these things in like Ethereum core devs, and we landed back on a single time slot every 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't experiment.
Yeah, I would lean towards sort of catering to this group, since we do show up to our meetings consistently, and pick a time based on the doodle that Lynn sends out. I find that I'm also pretty meeting free afternoon my time, which is after 9 a.m. for Juliet. So there's probably a time in there that would work for you, or that is comfortable. But moving forward, this will definitely continue to be an issue, and we're a global community, and we also believe in decentralization. So the hope there is that our working group grows to the size where there are multiple leaders in different regions, and we could do our work asynchronously and trust that other leaders in other regions are tackling the same issues that we're tackling, and that we're all aligned across our work streams. I think that we can sort of get to that bridge. We can cross that bridge when we get to it. But it's something to keep in mind. I think it is important to be inclusive of all of the community members involved.
Jenny, I agree. One more super quick thought, which is that we talked about doing these town hall type things. And so those are another option, another bridge, right? Those can be held at different times that work better for people in different places or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We do the Blockstack town halls are always at 10, and when I was in California for 4 months, that was awful for me. But we got so much attendance because that time just works for so many different people. So, but if you're doing it once a month, it's not an issue. Whereas for us, if we're meeting weekly or even bi-weekly, it can be a little tough. So yeah, that's another option to consider, just to even summarize our work. And we've all talked about, being able to work asynchronously more. And as this group grows and we start to tackle different work streams. So Juliet, I know that you and I have talked about this. There are a few different work streams that we're working on. And I think that it's probably sufficient to have like a project management board, or, to do updates over email on some work streams, but to come together on, some major work streams. So, the example being whatever we commit to in our proposal. So let's say there are 3 major deliverables. Those would be the issues that we would try to meet about regularly. And any sort of sub work streams or issues we could report on asynchronously, either in Discord or over email or forum or wherever we choose on GitHub.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the asynchronous part. That's something that we definitely have touched on before. And I think as we expand and as we plan for this to be a larger group, it's going to be necessary for anything to progress and get done. And I also think it gives that ability to split things up. You know, I think of the like the community evangelist call where we have one time set for here and one time set for Asia, but the work and that the group does is all cohesive as well and can be considered together. And then to Lane's point too, you know, the consistency is it really is key as well to say like, hey, you know, we have a list of issues or a list of set projects or deliverables. Here's where we get together, we discuss where we're at, we get a chance to voice any blockers, and we get to keep moving. But the majority of the action could happen asynchronously versus having to focus on that part on the call.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we just have a couple minutes left. So as a next step, Lane, you're going to send out that doodle, and we're going to pick a new time. It could be the same time, but we're going to pick a time to stick with for our next meeting. Do we feel like we should meet again this week, or do we want to take this week to process? And actually, maybe this is an opportunity to do some work asynchronously as well, since we all know that the big deliverable for us is putting together a proposal for a grant. So maybe we want to take this week to put together some of our own thoughts and notes, or I'm also happy to meet again based on the times that we choose. So I guess it's just up to the group, which should we meet this week based on the doodle results, or wait until next week?
I am definitely open to what everybody wants to do on that. The other thing I am curious about too is, you know, do we like the 1 week or the 2 week, the biweekly schedule?
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that we wanted to discuss now or as part of this next meeting?
So this has already evolved from a doodle into a Google form that's going to include that as a question. So feel free to discuss it now, or we can wait till we have some data and see what people say.
Sure, sure. Happy to make it more complicated.
Okay. Yeah, I think that you know, should we move forward with like a biweekly cadence? We'd probably just have to get really good at setting action items and checking in on those action items, because with the grant.io platform up and running soon, we'll probably want to submit soon too. Brittany, did you have like did you mention this earlier and I missed it, but did you have a timeline in mind for when this group could start submitting, or you know, how early could we actually submit?
Yeah, well, I'm happy, you know, before the platform is up and running, as we can do it more informally, but I'm, you know, I have a sort of just an early template of the like the questions for grants. So I can share that probably by Friday, like what that looks like. I just want to get feedback from a few folks individually, and then I'll be able to share that. So that would be like the draft, like what needs to be in the proposal. And I think, you know, the goal is to have it be short and efficient. But, you know, people who would apply for a grant would need to lay out like, what is the grant for? Like, how does this help further the mission? What are the deliverables of this grant? Like, what are the measures of success? So basically, you know, an outline with that. But if there's ideas on that sooner, like then the platform, we can talk about it, and then the application would happen once the platform's live, which, like I said, the deliverable from grant.io should be in 2 weeks. I think that's like July 30th is the deliverable date, but we'll have to like just make sure it's all bug tests and stuff. So maybe after, I think August 3rd is a Monday. So maybe that August 3rd, August 4th could be a submit date. But happy to talk about it like before that too, so you don't have to like wait until that date to put in ideas for that.
Okay. Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, I think, okay, so in addition to Lane's doodle, what I can do is I can start a collaborative doc for us to put down our rough ideas about, you know, what this group should look like. I think it's totally fine that we don't have a super clear-cut answer for, you know, definitively what this group is going to do and, you know, what it stands for. But it's worth getting everyone's thoughts, raw thoughts on paper and refining from there, because it sounds like we have time to do that. Okay, so yeah, next steps, Lane's Google form actually. Collaborative doc from me. Anything else that I'm missing, everyone? No?
Not directly for me, but if there is any feedback we need on the action items or any of the agenda items, or anything that we've set prior into moving things into this next phase, I'm definitely happy to help with that. I just wanted to voice that.
Oh, great. Yeah, if there are if you have like, overview type notes, Jason, of what like could help you there, maybe that would be helpful. Sending those to the Discord channel.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I can think of. Otherwise, we're a minute over, but I think that's pretty good given this is like a very big discussion. So looking forward to the next meeting, everyone. Thank you so much for a productive conversation.
Thank you, Jen.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Con. Have a good
Bye,
day.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.